Hi, and welcome back to GCSE History lessons. In this lesson, we will look at the Yalta Conference. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to understand what occurred at the conference in Yalta. You will remember from last lesson that the UK, USA, and USSR began to push Hitler's armies back after the invasion of Normandy in 1944. We mentioned briefly last lesson that in early 1945, it seemed that the Grand Alliance would soon win the war in Europe, and at Yalta, from February 4th until 11th, 1945, the Big Three tried to create an agreement about what the post-war world would be like. You should also remember that the Big Three divided Germany into occupation zones once the Nazis had been defeated on May 7th, 1945. So we know that the Grand Alliance won the Second World War. But let's rewind to examine what was actually decided about the post-war world in Yalta in February 1945. At the Yalta Conference, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin agreed to the following. They would not stop the war until the Nazis had surrendered unconditionally. The city of Berlin would be divided into 4 zones occupied by the US, UK, USSR, and France. Stalin agreed that France should be given a zone, but only if it was formed out of the UK and US zones. Key Nazis should be given a trial for their war crimes, and Germany should be demilitarized and denazified. It was agreed that German reparations would be paid to the USSR in the form of forced labor and industrial equipment, and a reparations council would be created and located in the Soviet Union. Stalin agreed to allow countries under his control free and fair democratic elections, and that the pro-communist provisional government he had established in Poland would be reorganized to be more democratic. This was finalized in a separate agreement known as the Declaration of Liberated Europe. At Yalta, the United Nations was also established, and Stalin renewed his promise to join the USA's war against Japan within 2 or 3 months of the defeat of Nazi Germany. The USA was granted access to Soviet airfields from which to base its bombing operations against Japan. From the agreements made at Yalta, we can see that the members of the Grand Alliance were working well together despite their different ambitions. In fact, at this stage in the war, the Big Three genuinely were allies. In November 1944, at the 27th anniversary of the Russian Communist Revolution, Stalin said that the alliance was vitally important to the Soviet Union's long-term interests. So, to summarize what we've learned today, the Yalta Conference of February 1945 led to many agreements on the fate of the world after the war. The UN was established and democratic elections promised for countries occupied by the Big Three during the war. Nazi war criminals would be prosecuted. The Grand Alliance would demand unconditional surrender from the Nazis, and Germany would be demilitarized and denazified. Germany and Berlin would be divided into occupation zones, and reparations would be paid to the USSR, including through forced labor and industrial equipment. The Grand Alliance was generally a genuine alliance between friendly nations at the beginning of 1945. Next lesson, we will look at major events that occurred after the Yalta Conference, which had a large impact on tensions between the USA, UK, and USSR, and damaged their ability to come to further agreements at the end of the war. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on GCSE History Lessons.